Our exhorting brother today is Brother Matthew Williams, and he's asked us all to read together Exodus chapter 4, verses 10 through 16. But Moses said to the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent either heretofore or since thou hast spoken to thy servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue. Then the Lord said to him, Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him dumb or deaf or seen or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. But he said, O my Lord, send, I pray, some other person. Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, Is there not Aaron your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well, and behold, he is coming out to meet you. And when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. And you shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you what you shall do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be a mouth for you, and you shall be to him as a God. The title of Brother Matthew's exhortation is Burdens.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to start off by saying, can everybody hear me? Good? Okay. So I'm going to start off by saying there will be a lot of pauses, a lot of quietness. So just bear with me. I'm just trying to gather some thoughts. I'm a little nervous, so I'm going to try to slow down and just go with it. All right. So my title this morning is Burdens. And usually of my few exhortations, I try to base them on my past week, something that I was struggling with, something that I was trying to work on, trying to be harder at. And so I chose burdens because for me this week, this talk was a burden. It was, throughout the whole week, it was lingering in the back of my mind, just kind of nagging at me. And it was really hard for me to come back to it and say, all right, it's time to write the talk. And then, I'd dismiss the thought and go, oh, I have a few more days. And then, Thursday would roll around, oh, I better start writing the talk. Dismiss it. A few more days would go by. Friday night, oh, time to write the talk. And dismiss it. And then Saturday, yeah, it's time to write the talk. You're running out of time. So for me, especially this week was hard because I had to write this talk. And I had, right now, I just have a lot of things on my mind. I'm a senior. It's April. I'm almost done with high school. You'd think for a senior in high school that this would be like the time, like you're almost done, you're almost ready to graduate. And I know Faith can relate with me. This is actually the hardest point in high school right now for me. It's weird because there's a lot of work to get done. There's a lot of things that I want to finish. There's a lot of final things, like just finishing my schoolwork, going out on a high note, getting my grades up, finding a date to prom, just a bunch of things that you have to focus on. And, it seems like kind of silly stuff, but to me, it's a lot of big stuff. Graduation's a big thing. Prom is a big thing. So I've just been struggling a lot with trying to balance all this stuff, work and school and prom and graduation, and just trying to find a balance. So the reason I chose burdens was because I feel very burdened by the end of the year for me, and I feel burdened by how troubling it is for me to juggle all this stuff out, and especially having to write a talk. So I have a few burdens that can relate to each of us. For younger kids, burdens probably like 4 to 8. Burdens would be being picked last on the soccer field. You don't want to be picked last. I don't want to seem like that kid. So that was something that can burden a child. Or maybe even at that young age having to speak publicly. For me, that's a big thing. But even at that young age, it can be a burden. It can be something you're afraid of, you don't want to do it, and you're scared. So then I moved up a few years to maybe a teenage years. For me especially, work, school, burdens, relationships. It's like you have your teenage years, you have a lot of different relationships, friends, enemies, people you never wish to see again. So you have a lot to deal with. Peer pressure is one of the biggest things. Your peers want you to do some things. You have to strive for perfection. You don't want to do those things. So it's hard to have friends that are pressuring you to do things you don't want to. And that's for me especially, that's a big burden. Right now, my future, my college, my career that I want to go into, what I want to do for the rest of my life, it's something that even, running out of time, it's a burden. It's troubling to me. I don't know what I want to do. I'm still trying to figure it out. And you have a lot of responsibility as a teenager. You've got a lot of things that you have to think about. You have, even being a brother here, you have a lot of responsibility. Before I was baptized in the truth, I came to church every week. I went to Bible school every summer. I listened, I learned. I just kind of, let that lesson linger in my mind. But, I've been baptized for about a year and a half now, a little bit closer to 2 years. And I've learned that you take on a lot when you become baptized. You take on the burden of having to exhort and the burden of having to preside. And for me, just because I'm young and I'm not that experienced, it's very hard for me to come up here and to speak because I feel like I don't know everything. I could read this book over and over and I would still have to, listen to God's word, and you'd have to find a understanding of it all. And you spend your whole life trying to do that. You're going to spend your whole life trying to make sure that God's word, and it backward, sideways, whatever. So that's a big thing for me, is coming up here and speaking because I feel like I'm not that experienced. So then I have some adult burdens. Raising a family, it's a big burden to have kids. They're costly, they're annoying, you don't want to, sometimes it's hard to raise a family. I can't speak for myself, Steve, yes. Income, if, in today's economy, it's hard to find a job, that's a big burden for adults, is if you have no way of income, how are you going to, you don't know what to do with your life. How are you going to if you do have a family, how are you going to keep them upheld? How are you going to care for them? If you have elderly people in your family, grandparents, it's really hard to take care of them, and you fear of losing somebody close to you, and that's a burden. Paying bills, nobody likes that. So that's a burden there. It kind of goes with the income. Paying for education for your kids, it's just, again, something you don't want to worry about, something that you wish you didn't have to. Work demands, work is demanding. You don't want to deal with work. Sometimes work can be the last thing you want to think of. And I think the biggest one for adults is if you do have children, you worry over them. I know for my parents especially, they worry a lot about me and Becca and Nick, and that's probably the biggest burden on my parents, is that they have to continuously worry about me and, what I'm doing with my life and Becca and Nick. So there's a lot of things that we have to deal with. And for some of us, there are, extra things. There's medical burdens. There are financial burdens. There are relationship burdens. So, this week was especially hard for me because Wednesday I had a appointment with my doctor, my endocrinologist, on my diabetes, and it was not a good appointment. And it was very upsetting to me, and it's hard because, you just got to, for me, it's been years now, and you just got to keep dealing with it, and I don't want to deal with it, and I need to just get off that mindset. I need to stop looking at it as a burden and start looking at it as a challenge, something that I can strive to be perfect at, something that I can work towards. So we all have our own different burdens, and we all, don't want to deal with them. But like today, like me coming up here and speaking about burdens, this burden isn't just a burden, but it's also a joy. Because coming up here, it is hard for me to speak. I feel like I can't find the right words, like Moses in today's reading, that I am eloquent and I can't find the right words, and that, it's a burden for me, but it's also a joy. I should, instead of looking at it as a burden, I should come up here and say, I should be glad today that I'm speaking. I should be glad that I can come up with an exhortation and, present it to all of you, and hopefully have you guys leave today with a thought-provoking idea that you can all take through your weeks. So I looked up some people in the Bible who were burdened, and I want to go back to Exodus 4:10 through 16. So as Uncle Mike read, Moses was very burdened by having to lead the people, to speak the people, and to lead them out of Egypt. And it says, I'm just going to reread it real fast. O Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. The Lord said to him, Who gave man his mouth? Who makes him deaf or mute? Who gives him sight or makes him blind? It is not I, the Lord. Now go. Or it is not I, the Lord. Now go. I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. But Moses said, O Lord, please send someone else to do it. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses. So right there, it seems like Moses is begging God, please don't make me do this. Please don't make me have to tell these people. Don't let me have to lead them out. And then it says the Lord's anger burned against Moses. God was angry with Moses. He was upset with Moses. And he said, What about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and his heart will be glad when he sees you. You will speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth and as if you were God to him. So for Moses, I can imagine that Moses was very burdened by this. He had to lead all the people out of Egypt, all his people out of Egypt. And Moses was leaving his life. He was a prince in that land, in Egypt. He was leaving a good life for him because God had asked him to. God had asked him, lead the people out of Egypt. Do this. And so Moses was, Moses, he knew that he didn't want to do it. Moses felt that he could not speak to these people, that he could not lead them out of Egypt. And it says that while he led them out of Egypt, they complained. The whole time they were complaining about leaving. And I mean, you can only imagine leading a group of people out of a land for their own good. And they were complaining about it the whole time. They were hungry. They were thirsty. You can just imagine how burdened Moses felt by this, that he was upset with them. I mean, I've never complained before, but you can imagine that Moses was very troubled by this, that he didn't want to deal with it, and yet because God had asked him to do this, that's exactly what he did. So now I'd like to focus a little bit on Jonah. So Jonah was told by God, we know the story, to go preach in Nineveh, and Jonah, he attempted to flee because he was burdened by the idea of the Ninevites being spared by God. Jonah did not like the Ninevites. He wanted them destroyed. He wanted God to destroy them. So Jonah was probably burdened by him. God had asked him to go to Nineveh and tell them that he warned them that they were going to be destroyed. But, my dad, we were talking about it last time. My dad said something that caught my mind, and it helped me relate to it better. It's like if say I were being bullied in school, and, a dean's walking down the hall, and if I say to the bully, hey, look, there's a dean, the bully's going to put his arm around me and pretend we're all buddy-buddy. And I thought that was a really good analogy to what Jonah did. Jonah he didn't want to warn them. He wanted them to be destroyed. He wanted God to rain down on them, wrath. So I imagine that it burdened Jonah greatly for him to have to go and tell the Ninevites, God is going to destroy you, because he wanted them to be destroyed. So now I want to turn to 2 Samuel 12. Verse partway through 15. The child that Uriah's wife had borne to David, he became ill. David pleaded with God for the child. He fasted and went into his house and spent the nights lying on the ground. The elders of his household stood beside him to get him up from the ground, but he refused, and he would not eat any food with them. On the 7th day, the child died. David's servants were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they thought, while the child was still living, we spoke to David, but he would not listen to us. How can we tell him the child is dead? He may do something desperate. David noticed that his servants were whispering among themselves, and he realized the child was dead. Is the child dead? He asked. Yes, they replied, he is dead. Then David got up from the ground after he washed, put on lotions, and changed his clothes. He went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. Then he went to his own house, and at his request they served him food, and he ate. Let me keep reading. His servants asked him, why are you acting this way? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept, but now that the child is dead, you get up and eat. He answered, while the child was still alive, I fasted and wept. I thought, who knows? The Lord may be gracious to me and let the child live. But now that he is dead, why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me. So for David was burdened by, David had a lot of burdens. He had Uriah killed, and he slept with Bathsheba, and he had a child with Bathsheba. I mean, you can imagine how that greatly burdened him. And right in this account, David was explaining how he when he fasted while the child was alive, but then after the child had died,